We have with us Commissioner Stephen Banks. And yes, you can applaud right there. He has a very unique perspective of having spent over 30 years in the Legal Aid Society, and in that position working on behalf of some of the city's most vulnerable citizens, challenging and often suing city government and on their behalf, and then joining city government and working in one of the largest social service agencies in the country, serving over 3 million New Yorkers. We are so glad that he has accepted our invitation to speak with us today, and we're going to let him have remarks. All right, Commissioner Stephen Banks, welcome.
Good morning. Everybody awake? My dear friend Nancy Waxstein was pointing out that it was great that we're starting at 8:30, which is always a good time instead of the 8 o'clock time that most meetings start. So I love the not-for-profit world. When my wife asked me what I was doing this morning, I said I was going to a 40 under 40 celebration. And she said, "You're not going to tell them you started legal aid when you were 7, right?" But in all seriousness, there is the flavor of kind of being in the Catskills this morning with this presentation, but it's a really serious event that I really was honored to be asked to speak at, because in the room there's an all-star collection of organizations, an all-star collection of rising stars, and an all-star collection of friends and family and colleagues. So give yourselves all a round of applause. So I wanted to particularly dwell for a moment on friends, families, and colleagues, because there are no rising stars without friends, families, and colleagues. And that is really an important thing to know as you continue to proceed with your careers in this area. Friends, family, colleagues are extremely important in terms of support, understanding the balance between work in your lives. On the other hand, it's great to see so many rising stars in this area of the city. I know we're a little bit behind in the schedule, but I wanted to just say that all of this shows the resiliency and the dedication of the not-for-profit community. There's no hurdle that can be put in your way. If there's an event to start, doesn't matter if you have a little time to come out up on the sidewalks. Networking later, do it early. It's great. Event's going to start a couple minutes late, doesn't matter. The speaker can narrow it down, because why? You picked a lawyer who practiced in some of the lowest courts of the land, where most of my time was spent. Counselor, can you tell me what this case is about in about 30 seconds? That's all I've got to hear what you have to say. So I have more than 30 seconds, but I want to just dwell on a couple of important things to think about in this area. First and foremost, it is true that I spent 33 years suing the government, mostly the agency that I now run. That joke never dies, I want to just say, no matter what happens. But what is important to understand is that all of those cases, all of the impact that those cases had, could never have happened without the not-for-profit community. It was social workers. It was people on the front lines throughout the city, referring clients to lawyers, working together, that made all of those cases happen. So you are an indispensable part of making social change happen. You see it every day. You're the eyes and ears on the ground. You're delivering direct services, and that's what makes it possible to make a difference, whether it's through the courts, through legislative advocacy, through work with the administration. So you play an intricate role. And New York is blessed with a not-for-profit community like no other place. Like no other place. Just looking at this room and reading off the names of the organizations, as I know will happen later in all of you, you can see the community that you've got. I really value, now that I'm inside government, the partnership that we have with you. I mean, it's kind of interesting. You're contractors and critics at the same time. I don't know about others, but I certainly welcome that at HRA. We've invited you in. There's every work group you can imagine that we have, and your perspective on frontline work and what clients need and what has happened to clients is invaluable as we move forward with reforms. Just as I said, we couldn't have brought all those lawsuits at the Legal Aid Society, we couldn't be making the reforms at HRA that we are without your input, without your work, without the help. Everybody comes in, you have those pamphlets to show me about your wonderful organization. I love hearing about the organizations, but what I really love hearing about and what is invaluable is hearing from people like the rising stars that are being honored today talk about what they see day in and day out in terms of client needs. And that's having a difference or making a difference in our provision of services. Last but not least, let me ask a question. Who here likes math? Okay. It's kind of funny, but I know, seeing my dear friend Ian Benjamin, who was the accountant that helped us rescue the Legal Aid Society from near bankruptcy, that the skill of math can't be emphasized enough in not-for-profit leadership. So for those of you that are rising stars, remember that part of what you're doing is providing services and meeting a critical need, but part of what you're doing is management and managing organizations. Legal aid, HRA, your organizations, they all need to be managed to make the difference, to make the reality that we want to implement new policies, effective policies for clients, to make that reality actually real for people. You need to be able to manage the organizations. And we have a great community of people here. We have terrific support for organizations, but I just want to put in a plug for, what do they say in the school system? Math matters. Math matters, but also management matters. It's not as exciting as changing policy. It's not as exciting as going into court and litigating, but none of the other things happen unless you have that management and math skill. So I'm looking forward to working with you all as we continue to make forward progress. It's great to see a rising generation of people under 40. I want to put a plug in for the years after 40, however. For those of you who are being honored with this under 40 stuff, life continues. You're being honored because of potential, not honored because you're going to go off someplace and be done with your life when you hit 40. So keep up the extraordinary work that you're doing, and you're really making a difference in the city, and I really appreciate the partnership with all of you. So I said I would take a question or two, which I know is not really traditional, but we're not that traditional at HRA these days. So I'm happy to take a question or two, and then I'll get the hook and be pulled off stage. Any questions? Not a bashful group. Not even from a rising star? Great. Must have said it all. Yeah, Jeff, of course I knew you'd have a question. Well, I'm not sure I have enough time to talk about that. But I would say that if the New York Post says we're providing more rental assistance to people than ever before, that would be one way to improve management. And I'll give you a little example of how you do that, which is, I think, reflective of many of the changes that we have been making at the agency. So when I first came in, I met with judges, landlords, and tenant advocates. And everybody complained about how long it took to get rent arrears checks issued from HRA. This is something I knew myself, that it took a long time to issue rent arrears checks. Why was it that it took so long? Because we were issuing the checks from all of the various HRA locations, and if the typist, I kid you not, was out, the check wouldn't be cut. So if we were in corporate America, we would create a central rent processing unit instead of having checks cut all over the city, and we would cut them centrally. We would not eliminate staff, but we would use staff more efficiently, effectively, and that's what we've done, and the rent checks come more effectively. The second thing in that same area that I would emphasize is we looked around and we said, you know what, we have not-for-profit partners in the community running these home-based offices, and they are doing a great job, but they have to deal with our bureaucracy by sending their clients to us to figure out whether they're eligible for certain grants. Why don't we outstation HRA staff in those home-based facilities and cut down the time for clients to be evaluated and cut down the time for clients to get help? Those are two examples of the kinds of below-the-radar screen, wonky kinds of things that we're focused on. But we've got an effort every week. We have a meeting with the senior managers of the agency. We have a reform stat, if you will. We go over each reform that has certain deliverables, how much was accomplished in the last week, what's to be accomplished the next week, and that is our way that we're managing to actual deliverables. So on the other hand, I'll be frank with you, you could walk into any one of our centers any day of the week, and some of you heard me say this, and there's still problems. You don't undo 20 years worth of bad policies overnight. But what we can do is every day try to change something and make progress, and I think that's what we're doing. Jeff. So let me answer this question, then I bet this is the last one I can answer, or I'm going to get the hook. So one of the things we wanted to see was the relationship between certain HRA policies in the past and homelessness. So we wanted to see cases in which people were applying for shelter who had had an HRA case closing or sanction in the last 12 months. And we found that in one period of time, 23% of the applicants for DHS shelter had an HRA case closing or sanction in the prior 12 months during 2013. And when we actually stretched it out further, we found that 35% of the heads of household applying for shelter had an adverse HRA action. So we've been reducing the number of sanctions. There are 18,000 fewer sanction cases this year than in the past, and we're continuing to work on that. We cleared a backlog of 70,000 pending fair hearings that were as a result of that. But at the same time, we wanted to understand who were the people that those policies were affecting. And so we've created a profile of who those clients are, and we're reaching out directly to them in their communities to determine what kind of services they may need from us and whether we can refer them to home base. It's a work in progress, but it's an example of using data that we have, not waiting for the perfect, but proceeding with the good to see whether or not we can make a difference for real life flesh and blood people as we're developing new policies and not waiting for the full realization of those policies. So great to have an opportunity to talk to you. Congratulations for the award winners. Thank you for all that you do to make New York a much better place to live for vulnerable New Yorkers.
Thank you so much.